Mr. Speaker, it is the Prime Minister's second Christmas in Downing Street, and by his own admission, he's not in control. He says nothing happens when he pulls the levers. Does he blame himself or the levers?
Mr. Speaker, I'll just set out what we've achieved this week, Mr. Speaker. We're setting out our Violence Against Women and Girls strategy tomorrow. That is me specialist support for abuse victims and the 999 calls experts. The next lever was 500 jobs protected at Grangemouth. Partnering with INEOS to safeguard the plant's future. Next lever was Erasmus scheme, which is being announced later on today from January 2027. The next lever, Mr. Speaker, the Employment Rights Bill became law. The biggest uplift in workers' rights in a generation. I've got a whole more list, Mr. Speaker. I could go on for a very long time.
Not sure exactly what that had to do with the question, Mr. Speaker. The fact is, the Prime Minister promised economic growth, but the only thing that's grown is his list of broken promises.
Good day, and welcome back to British Report. Imagine, if you will, the hallowed halls of Westminster, currently draped in festive tinsel that feels more like a funeral shroud than a celebration. The air is thick with the scent of mulled wine and impending disaster. Sir Keir Starmer, a man who has spent his entire professional life meticulously polishing his image as the ultimate manager of men, has just walked into a festive buzzsaw. It is not a policy paper or a civil service leak that has left the Prime Minister looking like a deer caught in the headlights of a runaway sleigh. No, it was a single, devastatingly sharp-witted strike from the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch. We are witnessing a moment of pure, unadulterated political theatre, where the mask of authority has been ripped off to reveal a leader who is seemingly being puppeted by the very unions that funded his rise to power. During a high-stakes session of Prime Minister's questions, Badenoch didn't just critique the government, she performed a forensic, live-to-air dismantling of Starmer's leadership, culminating in a festive quip that has left the Prime Minister's inner circle in a state of absolute meltdown. She told the nation exactly why the NHS is currently grinding to a halt, and her conclusion was as brutal as it was memorable. The Prime Minister simply doesn't have the baubles to stand up for the British people. Quick favour, if you are loving this fast-paced, sharp-edged look into the chaos currently tearing through Westminster, hit that subscribe button and click the notifications bell icon. Over 92% of viewers haven't yet. It's free, takes a second and means the world to us. Thanks. If you did, now back to the show. Because the Baublegate saga is only the beginning of a winter that is rapidly becoming Starmer's worst nightmare. Let us dive headfirst into the radioactive core of this controversy. As of this Wednesday, the National Health Service has been plunged into a 5-day state of paralysis. We are not talking about a minor administrative delay. We are talking about a full-blown strike by resident doctors, the backbone of our hospital system, who have decided that the best way to spend the lead-up to the new year is on a picket line. Their demands: eye-watering pay rises that would make a Silicon Valley executive blush. And while the country watches as surgeries are cancelled and emergency rooms overflow, the man in number 10 seems utterly powerless to stop it. The Tories have wasted no time in pointing out the staggering irony here. Sir Keir Starmer spent the last year essentially incentivising this behaviour. By handing the British Medical Association a massive no-strings-attached pay rise last year, he didn't buy peace, he bought a front-row seat to an even larger disaster. He showed the unions that if you squeeze hard enough, the Prime Minister will find the cash, regardless of the cost to the taxpayer or the patient. Kemi Badenoch's performance at the dispatch box was a masterclass in political obliteration. She didn't just ask questions, she laid traps. She demanded to know why, if these strikes are dangerous and utterly irresponsible, as Starmer himself has finally admitted, the government won't take the logical step of banning them. We do it for the police, we do it for the military, we do it for the professions where taking a day off means people actually die. So why is the medical profession treated as if it were a local coffee shop where a strike is merely an inconvenience? Badenoch's answer was a punch to the gut. Starmer is paralysed by his union paymasters. She told the House of Commons that the trade unions didn't just buy him for Christmas, they bought him for life. It is a narrative of ownership that is becoming impossible for the Prime Minister to shake. He looks less like a sovereign leader and more like a tenant whose landlord has just turned off the heating until the rent is tripled. The Baubles comment was the metaphorical cherry on top of a very bitter Christmas pudding. By adding that festive twist, Badenoch tapped into a deep-seated public frustration. There is a sense that the Prime Minister is playing at being tough while secretly nodding along to every demand made by the BMA. Starmer's refusal to back a ban on strikes, despite his own condemnation of the BMA's dangerous walkout, is the ultimate cake-and-eat-it strategy. He wants to sound like the defender of the patient while remaining the favourite of the union boss. It is a balancing act that Kemi Badenoch just pushed off the tightrope. The laughter from the opposition benches wasn't just partisan, it was the sound of a narrative shifting. The sensible manager is now being framed as the union's messenger, and in politics that is a label that is very hard to unstick. Let us transition from the theatre of the Commons to the grim reality of the Health Select Committee, where Health Secretary Wes Streeting was forced to face the music this morning. If Starmer is the man in the shop window, Streeting is the one in the basement trying to stop the boiler from exploding. His testimony was a chilling admission of just how dicey the situation has become. He didn't use the usual government spin, instead he spoke of a weight of responsibility that sounds remarkably like a confession of failure. Streeting admitted that the next 5 days are going to be challenging, but his real fear, his nightmare before Christmas, is the weeks that follow. He pointed out a terrifying truth. The consultants who are currently pulling double shifts to cover for the striking resident doctors are the very people we need to get us through the superflu peak in January. By the time the new year arrives, our senior medical staff will be knackered and the system will be running on fumes. Wes Streeting's honesty is almost as damaging as Badenoch's wit. By admitting that the consultants will be more knackered as a result of this strike, he has effectively confirmed that the government has no plan B. They are doing everything they can to keep the show on the road, but the road is currently a sheet of ice and the tyres are bald. Streeting insisted that giving in to the BMA's latest demands would have been unfair, but that sentiment offers very little comfort to the patient who has just been told their hip replacement is being pushed back to 20. The Health Secretary's dicey assessment is a far cry from the new era for the NHS that was promised during the election. It turns out that rebuilding the NHS is much harder when the people you need to build it are busy holding signs outside the hospital gates. The Prime Minister's response to all this has been a predictable retreat into the past. Every time he is challenged on his current failure, he reaches for the Tory legacy shield. He told the House that the Conservatives left the NHS on its knees. While that might be a useful talking point for a campaign rally, it wears incredibly thin when you are the one holding the checkbook. At some point, it's their fault stops being a strategy and starts being an excuse. The public knows the NHS was in trouble before July, but they also know that it is Sir Keir Starmer who is currently in the driver's seat. If the car is on its knees, perhaps stop letting the union bosses take the wheels off. Starmer's message to resident doctors to work with us sounds less like an invitation and more like a plea from a man who has run out of ideas. This entire saga exposes the fundamental weakness at the heart of the Starmer project. He wants to be the man of the working person, but he is finding out that the working person is the one suffering because of the striking person. The union paymaster narrative that Kemi Badenoch so brilliantly highlighted is the kryptonite to Starmer's Superman. If the public believes that the Prime Minister is unable to act in the national interest because he is in debt to the BMA and the TUC, his authority is finished. The 18-month honeymoon hasn't just ended, it has been followed by a messy divorce from reality. Badenoch's point that the Prime Minister has lost control resonates because it is backed up by the data. 60 days of strikes, a record-breaking flu surge, and a health secretary who is worried about the very people he is supposed to be leading. The comparison to the police and the military is the one that really stings. Why is it that the men and women who keep our streets safe and our borders secure are banned from striking, while the people who hold our lives in their hands are allowed to walk out whenever the pay offer isn't eye-watering enough? It is a question of public safety that the government refuses to address. Starmer's dangerous and utterly irresponsible rhetoric is hollow if it isn't backed up by legislative action. You cannot call something a threat to life and then allow it to happen 14 times in 2 years. This is the bauble-less leadership that Badenoch was talking about. It is a refusal to take the tough, unpopular decisions that a sovereign nation requires. It is the management of decline rather than the leadership of change. As we look toward the difficult new year that Badenoch warned about, the political landscape is shifting. The Conservative Party under Badenoch has found a way to weaponize the festive season against a Prime Minister who seems increasingly out of touch. The festive twist at PMQs wasn't just a bit of banter, it was a signal that the soft-touch era of the opposition is over. Starmer is being squeezed between a militant union and a resurgent Conservative front bench, and he looks increasingly isolated. Every cancelled surgery and every knackered consultant is a brick in the wall that is closing in on Downing Street. The Prime Minister might condemn the strikes with his words, but his silence on a ban speaks volumes. The reality of the super flu surge only adds to the suspense. We are heading into a period where the demand for healthcare will be at an all-time high, while the supply of healthcare is at a record low due to industrial action. It is a perfect storm of failure. Wes Streeting's admission that he is worried should be a klaxon for the entire country. When the man in charge of the NHS tells you it is dicey, it is time to start worrying yourself. The show on the road is currently being held together by the goodwill of a few exhausted consultants, and that is not a sustainable way to run a G7 nation. The Starmer meltdown that we are seeing on live TV is the reaction of a leader who knows he has been found out. In conclusion, Kemi Badenoch has done more than just obliterate Keir Starmer on live television. She has defined the battleground for the next 12 months. It is courage versus compromise. It is patience versus paymasters. And it is leadership versus logistics. The baubles joke will be the line that everyone remembers, but the underlying reality of a government that has lost control of its borders, its budget, and its hospitals is the real story. As the resident doctors prepare for their next walkout and the NHS braces for the January peak, the image of a bulbleless Prime Minister will be the one that stays with the voters. Sir Keir Starmer might be the one in the big chair, but as Kemi Badenoch so clearly showed, he is certainly not the one in charge. Thank you so much for watching.